Thank you so much for coming. My name is Charlie. I'm one of the owners here at Hammerfriar Gallery and Frame Shop. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is a really exciting artist talk at Bill Shelley's today, obviously. That's why you're here. Bill is such a joy. Every artist that we show here is such a joy to hear from, directly from the artist. We come to shows, we look at the art. Some of us like to learn more, hear from the artist, read a bit more. Others of us want to first just absorb the art in person and then maybe dig a little deeper. You're here today, clearly you want to dig a little deeper. Every time Bill has shared with us verbally, it's just been such a joy to get that fleshed out a little bit. This show, this show is such a conceptual show. It has such a strong unifying theme to it. So it's going to be a real joy to hear from Bill. By way of introduction, Bill Shelley is a Santa Rosa-based artist. He showed with Jill Plowman for years before we took over Hammerfriar 8 years ago. So we've gotten the pleasure to work with him for quite a number of years. And it's always been a joy because every time Bill brings in new work, it's something different. It's well thought out, it's conceptually strong, it's interesting. And Bill, I think, is one of the most, works with such integrity and inspiration with his work. Authenticity is a word that always really resonates with me whenever we get to show Bill's work. When Bill is not doing his artistic practice, he works in Berlin as well for several months a year doing art, but he's also a pursuer of the German language and ukulele practice. So just want to say really thank you, Bill, for sharing with us in person about the artwork. Thank you, Nancy Hayashibara, to be presenting. Also, this is a new one for us to have an audio presentation and a blend of artistic mediums in one presentation. So I'll let Bill take the floor, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Nancy, for helping with the presentation. So I think it's going to be very enriching to have some real-life examples of some of the music forms that inspired these pieces. To start off, this is a group participation section. We're going to sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat all together, and then 2 times around, and then we're going to split into 2 groups and sing it as a round. Okay? So does everyone know the tune? Okay. Starting note. Row the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. One more time. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Okay, so this half is group 1, this half is group 2. So this group's going to start off, and when we get to row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, then you start row, row, row. Okay? Okay, let's start. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a stream. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So the reason for that is that this piece here is entitled Canon, and what you just sang was a canon form in music. And composers like Bach took it to a whole other level, but that we just sang a very simplified version of melody going from A to D, but restarting itself at the C point, and so there's some overlap there. So Nancy's going to play another.
I'm not going to do any Bach right now, but another well-known canon that we know is Frère Jacques, right? Like so, we have. So when you have a canon, you have this main theme, so it's like a layer, and then you would start the other layer on top of that so that you would develop a certain kind of texture. So you have a theme upon a theme that starts at a different point, but it creates a different texture. So for example, if you have Frère Jacques, so you see when the other theme starts, it's starting on a different note from it. So it creates a little bit of texture, it creates a little bit of depth, it makes it a little bit more interesting. So that's kind of an example of what canon does, just like he did with Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
Thanks, Nancy. The canon piece, as a visually speaking, so that kind of layering over is expressed in these basic pyramid forms, layering over each other and then traveling across the page. So that was the challenge of this whole series, is to how do I put into visual terms a musical form. So anyway, on to the next one. This piece over here is entitled Unison, and another music form that, you know, is so simple, is just one melody sung by two voices. So the two voices could be a tenor and a soprano, or the two voices could be a violin and a trumpet, but they're singing the same melody. Even though the melody could be several octaves apart, they're still the same notes. So, Nancy?
So when you think about, the interesting thing about music is, music theory is one way to describe it, but there's also the way that you can experience it. For example, you could relate it to a tone. For example, if you hear that C and that C, if you were to draw it, would it be lighter or darker? Right? So if we have Row, Row, Row Your Boat again,
I'm gonna go behind you. I'm gonna go behind you.
so that's in unison together. They're not layered, they're not juxtaposed, they're happening at the same time. But you feel how that kind of stretches your ears. One part is hearing the upper tone, the other part's hearing the lower part. And so you have this visual example of it. So that's the wonderful thing about music, is like, it's trying to explain one sense with a different one. You're trying to explain sight and sound, or, you know, sound with sight.
Thanks, Nancy. And so with this piece, it's the melody line is the horizon line, and then the two voices are, there's one voice below that and one voice above that, and then these edges are varied. So this is all crisp. These are all crisp edges down here, and these are softened. So it's two different voices, but they're singing the same pattern, the same notes.
So it could be different instruments. So like a clear line maybe with like an oboe, right?
Yeah.
You have something that has a little bit more resonance to it. You know, maybe a harp piece has a little bit softer edge.
And then this piece is called Retrograde Inversion. And so Nancy, can you play a sample of that?
So retrograde, sometimes inversions, they're looking at the actual physical notes on the page. So it's kind of like a mirror image. So if you had this mirror image right there, or you would have opposing motion. So if I'm going up the keyboard in a chromatic pattern, and then you had an opposing direction, you would have that. Coming back together. Yes.
Great, thanks. And then retrograde, the retrograde part is not only is this a mirror image of, like, this is A through D and then D through A, but it's also flipped upside down. So there's compositions that use that as well. And let me see what's next. Okay, I'll talk about the materials that are used for the drawings. The surface is polypropylene, or the brand name for it is UPO paper, and it's basically a sheet of plastic that it's the same material that is very similar to like the political lawn signs that you see, that material that's super sturdy and will withstand anything. So it's great. It doesn't waffle or bend or anything when wet media is applied to it. So, and this is done with spray painting through stencils. And the stencils are also made out of polypropylene because it just cuts so cleanly. And then when you use adhesive to put the stencil on top of the base, there's no bending or waffling, so it's absolutely flat. So it just works really well. And then, as I said before, you can vary the edge by slightly lifting up the stencil, and then the spray paint will leak underneath. So, what else? I think it's about all of them, about the materials. Cadences, so we covered the musical forms, and the cadences in the show are about, cadences are the last 2 or 3 chords in a piece or a phrase that let the hearer know that this piece is coming to an end. It's something everyone has heard their whole life, but not really maybe thought about or put a name to. Sometimes cadences are in the middle of a piece, at the end of a phrase, so they let you know that the phrase is ending, but there's something that is coming next. So a cadence can really act as a period or a comma in a piece of music. So this is the first cadence, the authentic cadence. And Nancy, can you play an example of that?
Sure. So if we're just doing this common thing that people know, here's the authentic cadence, and letting you go, it's done. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so with cadences, without going into a lot of musical theory, like what Bill said, it's like they're a storytelling device. So for example, like if it's anybody's birthday, like that is still an authentic cadence, but everyone knows, okay, now it's our time to sing. So it's kind of experiential with cadences, like how they make you feel also depends on what your background is with music, like what your cultural background is with music. For example, if we had space aliens come down and they had a grammatical form where they weren't supposed to finish, that would be their form. And if they heard something like, that would be odd for them. But for us, we understand that because we have this tradition that we've heard lots of different songs, and that way, especially from classical music. So that's an example of an authentic cadence.
That reminds me of when I was taking, years ago, I was taking oboe lessons from Dan Celador, who's a great musician in this county, in Santa Rosa. And, I would practice something, I would try to get the notes down and get it in tune, and it still just sounded like I was marking time. And then Dan would play the same section, hi Jerry, and it would be music. So what's the difference? And one of his advice and one of his coaching pieces was, music is like a conversation. Think of how we talk to each other, and it's the ending for the cadences. We don't talk, like a typewriter types. We talk. There's waves of motion and volume, and so yeah, music is very conversational. This piece is, visually, the chord is here and then it lands. So that's the visualization of that. The next cadence is interruptive, or sometimes called deceptive cadence.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in this, or something like that, right? So we're thinking about it not quite ending, right? And then we would expect something else to happen after that.
And there's an element of surprise. You're expecting a landing, but you didn't quite. And then there is Phrygian is these two here. I don't know if you can see them kind of sideways. Then after the talk, you can look at them. So yeah, Nancy, can you go into those?
Okay. So one of the most recognizable ones will actually probably be the Phrygian cadence. If you think about God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, right? So we have. So that's actually a Phrygian cadence in that part. So it leaves you still wanting to expect a little bit more. And like I said, without going too much into music theory, it's kind of like about when you hear certain things, when you meditate on it, how does it make you feel? There's no one answer to it. It is experiential to what you've been through and what your background is. So, I don't know, maybe, what is that? Does anyone have any feelings about like how that makes them feel?
Do it again. It's just chord or key, isn't it? It's a little uncertain.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, there's no one answer to it. It's just like in music theory, a lot of times they're trying to name things, right? You have to give name things so that you can talk about it with other people. And then there are lots of rules for composers and stuff like that. But as a listener, you know, you can make up that own thing. And as an artist, of course, it's like you meditate on these things. What do certain cadences make you see? I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term synesthesia. So some people, when they hear things, they actually see color. Or, you know, when they see things, they smell a certain kind of thing. You know, so it's like one sense kind of sparking the other. So it's kind of interesting, and we can, even if we don't have synesthesia, we can kind of participate in how sounds make us see things.
So then these are the two
Phrygian.
Phrygian cadences, these pieces where it starts out kind of landed and solid and then goes somewhere unexpected. The last cadence is plagial, which is, it's in the atrium back there. The middle piece is plagial, and it's probably the most familiar cadence because it's sometimes called the Amen cadence. It's at the end of a hymn, you have those two chords that let you know that Amen, that's the end of the hymn.
Yeah, so it's right, so the etymology of that is plagos, like from the side. So it's not quite as like this definitive thing. It's more this. And again, it depends on how you would perform that as a performer, right? If you did it very declaratory, then this could sound a little bit more stronger than. A lot of it is context and how the performer chooses to do it. But you can take those two, you know, and just see how that feels for you.
Thanks, Nancy. I chose from this whole series, the paintings and the drawings, chose geometric forms, cubes, spheres, columns, or cylinders, because I thought it would be appropriate to use these pure geometric forms to express music ideas, because essentially, to me, music is an abstract art form. Even when there's a big story attached, you know, like Peter and the Wolf. So, oh, that sounds like the bird, or that sounds like the wolf, or whatever. But still, your initial impression is from the sound, the rhythm, the tone, the pitch, and the harmony. So that's why I went for the geometric forms. And it's interesting to narrow your scope down, because you find all these other choices by doing that. So narrowing it down to those basic forms, and also in these narrowing it down to very spare use of color was interesting too. So on the side story, I remember when I was in 5th grade, we had a rainy day and we couldn't go out for recess, so the teacher handed out paper to everyone and crayons, and put on Tchaikovsky on the record player and said, draw, you know, and I remember having no problem with that. I wasn't drawing things or, you know, animals or anything that I thought it was story oriented. I was just drawing. So the music connection with the visual world came very easy to me. I'm not sure why. We always had really good music in our house, probably helped. But anyway, the paintings are, 5 paintings are, represent the 4 standard movements of a symphony. So it's the first movement, second, and those 2 that are close together are the third movement and the fourth movement right there in the corner. And I think the symphony and the sonata form are interesting because it's very much like the essay form, where you have, in an essay you have an introduction, you have the body of the essay, which is various topics or points, and some analysis and some transitions between those points, and then you have a conclusion. And that's very much like the structure of a symphony. So, and it kind of gets back to the conversational aspect of music. The first one here is the first movement is also called exposition. When typically in a symphony there's two themes introduced in the music, so we have 2 different forms, one curvilinear and one angular. And this one has the most color of all the paintings, because typically the first movement is the most fiery and the most active movement. And then the second movement over here is the development movement. And so typically this movement will take one of the themes in the first movement and expand on it. So, and I did, this was my problem child of all the oil paintings, because I just couldn't, I thought I wasn't even going to include it in the show, but I pushed and pulled on it for so long it ended up being my favorite oil painting in the show. So I was happy with it, and introduced very sparingly the 3 primary colors here in the painting. And then this movement, recapitulation. Typically the third movement of a symphony will take the 2 themes introduced in the first movement and expand on each one of those themes. And then the last movement over there is sometimes called the coda, and most composers have pretty much free reign in the coda, and they can do anything they want. But a lot of times they'll take pieces of the other themes and mix them up, and the coda will really declare that this is the end of the symphony. Oil painting was a challenge for me, because I hadn't oil painted for a long time, and the lusciousness, the luxurious quality of the color was familiar, but I had to relearn a lot of the chemistry of oil painting, which is like each of those pigments has a different proportion of medium in it. So, in other words, if you painted with oil paint out of the tube and let it all dry, each color would, if you look to the side, will have a different degree of matteness or glossiness, and it's very patchy. So then the chemistry end of it is oiling the painting up, covering it with oil and really saturating with oil, and then varnishing it, and get to where the surface is pretty uniform, so it's not a distraction. So all that end of it, I had to crack some books and relearn, which I enjoy doing. So I mean, every time I do a series, there's a different learning curve involved with it. So, and there's a lot of trial and error in the drawings as well, because all of these shapes are separate stencil shapes. They're not overlaid, so it's tricky to get them to just cleanly abut against each other, because any overlap, or if you don't do that, you're getting some overlap or some gaps that are very distracting. So let's see, what else did I want to cover? I think that's about it, except I did bring in some show and tell samples. This shows like a preparatory drawing for the canon drawing, and then it goes to tracing paper, so it can be transferred onto the UPO, and then it gets transferred on the UPO. And I mean, even up to this point, there's a lot of moving around and trial and error in terms of getting the shapes to work with each other. And then cutting stencils and spraying, and then getting toward a finished
finished drawing. Yeah, by the way, back to the oil paintings. I lucked out because when all those layers of oiling out and varnishing, each one of those processes takes a lot of drying time, and I really lucked out with this early spring stretch we had of very nice, warm, dry weather, so that was in my favor. And there's some prep drawings for the oil paintings. And I just brought this in because, because it's on UPO paper. But this was my introduction to UPO when I was still into landscape painting. I was going to watercolor workshops in Yosemite, and one of the instructors was like hooked on UPO, and so he introduced us to UPO. And this is quite a bit thicker than this paper, but it comes in various thicknesses and various various rough qualities. But UPO with water media, it doesn't sink in at all. So if you wipe it, it's going to bring the white completely back. So it's an interesting material to work with. So this is my response to Cook's Meadow in Yosemite Valley. So and the teacher liked it, so I always kept it. But anyway, that's about covers everything I had. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Where did you get the concept or the motivation or the inspiration for this?
Well, I started taking ukulele a couple of years ago, and I got in with a good teacher that never talked about ukulele. All she really discusses is music theory. So I went, for years I played oboe, which is, you're responsible for one note with that instrument. So I got into a stringed instrument where you're playing more than one note at a time, and you're playing chords, and you're playing chord progressions. And so I just, it started to be really interesting to learn more about that. It's so much more to learn. But that's what got me started on it. And I don't know, with artwork, you got to pick something. I could have picked Barnes. I could have picked anything. And you can do a series about that subject. So yeah, that's what interested me. And I'm just generally very interested in music. So I think whatever you pick, it has to be real to you. That's very important. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What were you cutting your stencils with?
Exactly.
Just exactly.
Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah, easy. It just this stuff cuts just like butter. It's really smooth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bill,
Yeah.
so this is the same symphony?
Well, it's the same format for a symphony. It's not a particular symphony.
Okay, but in your mind,
Yeah.
did you go from here to there? Or did you create this and then?
Yeah, I would say so.
Oh, you
Because
think so?
because the forms. This is a response to these forms and so on down the line.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you were stuck with the second one,
Yeah.
could you leave that and go on?
Yes.
Okay.
I had to. Well, the two things, it's good to break free of it and work on something else and let that sit for a while. And also, all these things have to be allowed, the oil has to be allowed some drying time, so you need to rotate through.
But it looks like
So-
you took some of that with you, even though it's trouble.
Yeah, oh yeah, I learned a lot from it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Hi. I'm intrigued by the combination of the soft edges over there on the first one where you sprayed and it's not really clean.
Mhm.
And then also here,
Mhm.
with the more painterly effect. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, well this one, the others the other oil paintings went through so many layers and generations of values in color and, well, a little bit of color and placement. But this was like, I just got this one down, and I started painting this rather thin, back area, and then I wasn't finished with it, and I looked at it and I thought, this thing's off the runway. I don't want to touch it anymore. It's just, to me, it was just done. So that one happened quickly. Yeah.
Did you listen to any specific composers when you were working, Bill, or do you work in silence? Do you listen to music as you're...
I was listening to some music. I was listening to some news. And I was working without anything, so all free. Yeah, but not I find Bach and Scarlatti and Mozart very pure, and it's like the form is really laid bare compared to lush symphonic music. So I kind of listen to those composers. And, yeah. Any other questions? Oh yeah. Hi.
Hi. This is just sort of a comment. I don't know. When I was in my early 20s, I lived in Korea for 2 years, and I just got so fascinated with their musical tradition because it was so much more visual to me than Western music.
Oh.
So I'm just trying to think, if this were done with a different kind of musical tradition.
Yeah, right.
How the images would be different.
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is just Western, the Western system. So yeah, I'm sure it would be. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any other questions? Thank you, Nancy, for playing. Thank you all for coming. And there's those pieces in the atrium you may not have seen, and then if you have time and the desire, if you go up the spiral staircase, there is artwork up there. Some of my artwork, but by other artists as well. So yeah, a lot of people don't. And the bathrooms are up there as well. Anyway, thanks a lot for coming.